You know you're middle-aged when your idea of a wild night is 2 Advil and a YouTube rabbit hole about conspiracy theories. That's where I was 3 months ago. Neil Carter, 41, senior field engineer, living what I called my beautifully boring life in suburban Baltimore. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Lauren and I had been married 18 years. Our sons Josh and Drew were away at college, the mortgage was manageable, and I thought we'd figured out this whole adulting thing. I should have known better. In engineering, when something looks too stable, it usually means you're not seeing the stress fractures. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday night in March. Lauren was hunched over her phone at the kitchen table, typing with the intensity of someone defusing a bomb. Her paralegal job at Morrison & Associates had always kept her busy, but lately she'd been glued to that device like it contained the secrets of the universe. "Work emergency?" I asked, grabbing a beer from the fridge. She didn't look up, just coordinating some depositions with Eric. Eric Pomeroy, her boss. The guy I'd met exactly twice at office parties, balding, pushing 45, with a kind of smug smile that made you want to check your wallet afterward. Lauren always called him brilliant and so dedicated to his clients. I called him Pumper because of his overly enthusiastic handshake and the way he pumped his arms when he walked, like he was perpetually late for something important. "Must be some complex depositions," I said, noting she'd been typing for 20 minutes straight. Lauren finally looked up, her expression flickering between guilt and annoyance. "You wouldn't understand the legal complexities, Neil." There it was, the condescension that had been creeping into our conversations lately. The subtle suggestion that my engineering brain couldn't grasp the sophisticated world of paralegal work. I let it slide, like I'd been letting a lot of things slide. Over the next few weeks, the pattern intensified. Late-night client meetings, weekend case research, new lingerie that never seemed to make it into our bedroom rotation. I'm not a paranoid guy, but I'm observant. It's my job to notice when structures start showing signs of failure. The breaking point came during a dinner party at our friend's house. Dave Morrison, my best friend since college and no relation to Lauren's law firm, was grilling burgers while I nursed a beer and half-listened to the wives' conversation on the patio. "Lauren's been glowing lately," said Gina, Dave's wife, with that particular tone women use when they think they know something juicy. "Must be all that cardio," replied Mel, Lauren's closest friend, followed by knowing giggles. My engineering brain started calculating. Lauren hadn't been to a gym in months. She'd canceled her membership last year, claiming she preferred outdoor activities. What outdoor activities? She hadn't hiked, biked, or even walked around the block in recent memory. "She's finally found someone who appreciates her intelligence," added Terry, another friend from Lauren's book club. "A real man who understands her needs." The beer suddenly tasted like aluminum. I looked over at Lauren, who was deep in conversation with Dave about property taxes, completely oblivious to her friend's commentary. Or maybe not so oblivious. Maybe she was just better at compartmentalizing than I'd given her credit for. That night, I started paying closer attention. The credit card statements showed charges I didn't recognize. The Marriott downtown, expensive wine purchases, something called Auto Spa Premium Detail for a car we didn't own. When I asked Lauren about the hotel charge, she claimed it was for a client meeting. "Since when do paralegals take clients to hotels?" I asked. "It's complicated," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Eric thinks outside the office meetings help clients feel more comfortable discussing sensitive matters." Eric again. Always Eric. I'm not proud of what I did next, but desperate times and all that. While Lauren showered, I checked her phone. She'd gotten sloppy with her password, our anniversary date, which would have been sweet if she wasn't using it to hide an affair. The text thread with EP told me everything I needed to know. EP, can't stop thinking about yesterday. You're incredible. Lauren, same here. Neil's working late tomorrow. Want to come over? EP, your place or mine? I detailed the Audi today. Lauren, mine. I'll make that pasta you love. EP, and for dessert? Lauren, you know exactly what's for dessert. I set the phone down carefully, my hands surprisingly steady. 18 years of marriage, 2 kids, a shared life built from nothing, and she was throwing it away for a balding middle manager with a detailed Audi. The shower was still running. I walked to our bedroom window and looked out at the suburban street where we'd raised our boys, where we'd planned to grow old together. The streetlights cast everything in a pale, artificial glow, making the familiar landscape look alien and cold. My phone buzzed with a text from Dave. "Great seeing you tonight. Everything okay? You seemed off." I typed back, Just tired. Engineering project stress. But I wasn't tired. For the first time in months, I was wide awake. My mind was already working, calculating angles and stress points, identifying the weak spots in their little arrangement. They thought they were so clever, so careful. They had no idea they were dealing with someone who made a living figuring out how things break, and how to make them break faster. Lauren emerged from the bathroom in her robe, humming softly. She kissed my cheek and said, "I might be working late tomorrow. Don't wait up." "Sure thing," I said, smiling. "I'll probably work late too. Got some research to do." She had no idea how much research I was planning to do. The next morning, I called in a personal day and drove to downtown Baltimore. If Lauren was going to treat our marriage like a demolition project, I figured I should approach this with the same methodical precision I used on actual demolition projects. My first stop was Pinnacle Investigations, a small firm run by Maria Santos, an ex-Baltimore PD detective who'd gone private after 20 years on the force. Dave had recommended her when his brother suspected his business partner of embezzlement. She was sharp, thorough, and had zero tolerance for cheating spouses. "Adultery cases are bread and butter," Maria said, sliding a contract across her desk. "Usually pretty straightforward. Cheaters think they're smarter than they are, but they all make the same mistakes." "What kind of mistakes?" "Patterns. Same restaurants, same hotels, same times. They get comfortable, sloppy. Your wife and her boss, they'll have a routine by now. Give me a week. I'll have enough evidence to paper your lawyer's office." I signed the contract and wrote a check from my personal account, the one Lauren didn't have access to. "One more thing. I want to know about his finances too. Assets, debts, the works." "Planning something specific?" "Just being thorough." Maria's smile was sharp as a blade. "I like thorough clients. They get the best results." While Maria started her surveillance, I began my own investigation. I'd underestimated the therapeutic value of righteous anger channeled through systematic planning. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again, focused, competent, in control. I started with Eric's social media presence. The man was a walking advertisement for midlife crisis cliches, photos of his detailed Audi, check-ins at expensive restaurants, workout selfies that suggested he'd discovered the gym about 6 months ago. Recent posts showed him at places I recognized from our credit card statements. His LinkedIn profile revealed more useful information. He'd been at Morrison & Associates for 8 years, recently made partner, owned a condo in Federal Hill, divorced 2 years ago, no kids. His ex-wife had kept the house in Towson, and, based on public records, most of their assets. The pieces were falling into place. Eric was a newly minted partner trying to rebuild his lifestyle after an expensive divorce. Lauren was a paralegal in an 18-year marriage, feeling unappreciated and invisible. Classic midlife affair material. But knowledge without action is just expensive entertainment. I needed to start applying pressure. Phase 1 was subtle. I created a fake email account and sent Eric's office an anonymous tip about inappropriate relationships between partners and staff. Nothing specific, just enough to plant seeds of doubt. Then I called the auto spa where he detailed his car and asked about their services, mentioning I'd heard great things from Eric at Morrison & Associates. "Oh yeah, Mr. Pomeroy," the guy said. "He's a regular. Comes in every Friday, wants everything perfect for the weekend. Nice guy, good tipper." Every Friday. Lauren's late client meetings were on Friday nights. Phase 2 required more creativity. I waited until Friday afternoon, then drove to Eric's office building. His precious Audi was parked in the reserved partner section, gleaming under the parking garage lights. I'd brought supplies, nothing illegal, nothing permanent, just some creative inconveniences. Sugar in the windshield washer reservoir would create an interesting sticky mess on his windshield. A small piece of raw fish tucked into the air intake would make his weekend drives memorable. And superglue in the door locks would ensure he'd have plenty of time to think about his choices while waiting for a locksmith. I left a note under his windshield wiper. "Enjoy the ride, Pumper. A concerned friend." Then I went home and waited. Lauren returned Saturday morning looking flustered and angry. "Eric had car trouble last night," she said, not meeting my eyes. "I had to help him deal with it." "That's unfortunate," I said, not looking up from my newspaper. "What kind of trouble?" "Vandalism. Someone messed with his car. It's terrible. Who would do something like that?" "Probably someone who doesn't appreciate his business practices," I said. "Coffee's fresh if you want some." She stared at me for a long moment, but I kept reading the sports section like we were discussing the weather. Finally, she poured coffee and disappeared upstairs. My phone buzzed with a text from Dave. "Want to grab lunch? Gina's out with her book club." I met Dave at our usual spot, a sports bar near the harbor. He was already nursing a beer when I arrived, and I could tell something was on his mind. "So," he said after I'd ordered, Gina came home with some interesting gossip yesterday. Yeah? Apparently Lauren's been the topic of conversation at their little book club meetings. Her friends think she's having some kind of renaissance. I kept my expression neutral. Renaissance? That's what they're calling it. New clothes, new attitude, talking about finally being appreciated for who she really is. Ring any bells? Dave had known me long enough to read between the lines. I could see him putting pieces together, his expression shifting from casual curiosity to concern. Neil, if something's going on, you know you can talk to me, right? I looked at my oldest friend, this guy who'd been my best man, who'd helped me move into my first apartment, who'd been there for every major moment of my adult life. For a second, I considered telling him everything, but Dave was a good guy, the kind who'd try to talk me into marriage counseling and working things out. I wasn't interested in working things out. I was interested in evening the score. Everything's fine, I said. Lauren's just going through something. Midlife stuff, you know? Dave didn't look convinced, but he didn't push. We finished lunch talking about the Orioles' chances this season and our plans for summer vacation. Normal guy stuff. The kind of conversations I'd been having for 18 years, back when I thought normal was permanent. That afternoon, Maria called with her first report. Your instincts were right, she said. They've got a routine, Friday nights at his place, Sunday afternoons at yours when you're not home, occasional lunch meetings at the Marriott. I've got photos, receipts, the whole package. What about his finances? Interesting story there. He's leveraged to the hilt. The condo has a massive mortgage, he's got credit card debt, car payments on the Audi, alimony to the ex-wife. His partner's salary looks good on paper, but after expenses, he's living paycheck to paycheck. Perfect. Eric wasn't just stealing my wife. He was doing it on borrowed money. How long do you need for a complete file? Give me another week. I want to document their pattern thoroughly. Judges love consistent evidence of ongoing adultery. I'm not interested in judges, I said. What are you interested in? I watched a young couple walking along the harbor, holding hands, looking at each other like they just discovered love. Had Lauren and I ever looked like that? Probably. Once upon a time, in a different life. Justice, I said finally. Maria was quiet for a moment. Just remember, Mr. Carter, the best revenge is the kind that doesn't land you in jail. Don't worry, I said. I'm an engineer. I believe in structural integrity. Even when I'm planning to bring the whole thing down. Monday morning, I took another personal day and drove to First National Bank, where Lauren and I had maintained our joint accounts for 15 years. I'd spent the weekend researching Maryland divorce law, and what I'd learned was enlightening. In a contested divorce, assets acquired during marriage are typically split 50-50. But there's a window between discovery and filing where the betrayed spouse can take reasonable steps to protect themselves from further financial harm. The key word being reasonable. I was about to test the boundaries of that definition. Mr. Carter, said Janet Williams, our longtime bank manager, what can I do for you today? I need to restructure our accounts, I said, sliding my identification across her desk. I'm concerned about unauthorized access. It wasn't technically a lie. Lauren's access was about to become very unauthorized. Within an hour, I'd moved our joint savings, $43,000, into a new account under my name only. I closed our joint checking account and opened a new one, transferring just enough to cover the mortgage and utilities. I changed passwords on our investment accounts and removed Lauren's access to our credit cards. Legally, it was my right. Morally, it felt like the first fair thing that had happened in months. My next stop was the law office of Patricia Kellerman, a divorce attorney Dave's brother had recommended. Patricia was in her 50s, with steel gray hair and the kind of direct gaze that suggested she'd seen every variation of human stupidity and wasn't impressed by any of it. Adultery cases are straightforward in Maryland, she said after I'd explained the situation. We're not a no-fault state, so documented infidelity affects both asset division and alimony. With the evidence you're gathering, you'll be in a strong position. What about timeline? Depends how contested she wants to make it. If she's smart, she'll settle quickly. If she's stubborn, we could be looking at months of litigation. I thought about Lauren's new attitude, her confidence, her casual dismissal of my concerns. She wasn't going to be smart about this. Prepare for stubborn, I said. Patricia smiled grimly. My favorite kind of case. The stubborn ones always end up paying more in legal fees than they would have lost in settlement. That evening, I waited for Lauren to come home from her late client meeting. She arrived at 10:30, looking disheveled and slightly drunk. Her hair was messed up, her lipstick was gone, and she had that post-sex glow that I hadn't seen directed at me in months. How was work? I asked from the couch, where I'd been reading a book about strategic planning. Fine, she said, not looking at me. Long day. I'm going to shower and go to bed. Before you do that, we need to talk. Something in my tone made her stop. She turned, and for the first time in weeks, I had her complete attention. I know about Eric, I said simply. The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth, closed it, then sat down heavily in the chair across from me. Neil, I can explain. I'm sure you can, but I'm not interested in explanations. I'm interested in logistics. I pulled out a folder and set it on the coffee table between us. Divorce papers. I'm filing tomorrow. Lauren stared at the folder like it might explode. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. This is crazy. We can work this out. Marriage counseling, therapy, whatever you want. What I want is for you to not be sleeping with your boss. Since that ship has sailed, divorce seems like the logical next step. She started crying then. Big, dramatic tears that might have moved me 3 months ago. Now they just seemed like another manipulation, another performance in her repertoire of getting what she wanted. I made a mistake, she sobbed. It didn't mean anything. It's just been so hard, feeling invisible in this marriage, feeling like you don't see me anymore. I saw you, I said quietly. I saw you every day for 18 years. I saw you when you were pregnant with Josh and couldn't keep anything down for 3 months. I saw you when your mother died and you cried for a week. I saw you when you got promoted and we celebrated with champagne on the back deck. I saw you, Lauren. You just decided I wasn't worth seeing back. The tears kept coming, but they weren't moving me anymore. I felt detached, clinical, like I was observing someone else's domestic crisis. The boys, she said desperately. What about Josh and Drew? They're adults. They'll understand that their parents couldn't make it work. It happens to half the marriages in America. You're being so cold. This isn't like you. She was right. The old Neil would have been yelling, crying, begging her to explain why our marriage wasn't enough. The new Neil had moved beyond emotional responses into strategic thinking. I also moved our money, I said. You'll find your access to our joint accounts has been restricted. That stopped the tears immediately. You can't do that. Actually, I can, and I did. You'll have access to your salary and your personal checking account. Everything else is tied up pending divorce proceedings. Lauren's expression shifted from grief to anger to calculation. I watched her mental gears turning, probably wondering how much Eric could help with her immediate expenses. This is financial abuse, she said. This is asset protection. There's a difference. She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. I need to call my lawyer. Good idea. You're going to need one. She started toward the stairs, then turned back. Eric won't let you get away with this. And there it was, the threat I'd been waiting for, the confirmation that this wasn't just an affair, but a partnership. They'd probably been planning this conversation, strategizing about how to handle me if I found out. Eric should worry about his own problems, I said. I hear someone's been vandalizing his car. Lauren's eyes widened. That was you? I have no idea what you're talking about. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her recalibrating, realizing that the husband she'd been dismissing and deceiving might be more formidable than she'd assumed. You've changed, she said finally. No, I replied. I just stopped pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. After she went upstairs, I poured myself a scotch and sat on the back deck, looking out at the yard where Josh and Drew had played soccer, where we'd hosted barbecues and birthday parties and all the normal celebrations of a normal family life. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria. Got some interesting intel on your boy Eric. Call me tomorrow. I raised my glass to the empty yard. Here's to interesting intel, I said aloud. Tomorrow, the real fun would begin. Maria's intel was better than I'd hoped. Eric wasn't just financially overextended. He was actively hiding his precarious situation from his law firm partners. The detailed Audi was leased, not owned. His Federal Hill condo was 3 months behind on association fees, and his ex-wife was threatening to take him back to court for missed alimony payments. He's a house of cards, Maria explained over coffee at a downtown cafe. One strong wind, and the whole thing collapses. What kind of wind? Public embarrassment, professional scandal, anything that threatens his partnership status. These white shoe law firms don't tolerate partners who bring negative attention. I thought about Morrison and Associates' reputation. They handled high-profile corporate clients, political figures, old Baltimore money. Image was everything. How public are we talking? Maria smiled. Depends how creative you want to get. That afternoon, I started phase 3 of my campaign. If Eric and Lauren wanted to play house, they were going to do it under a spotlight. I began with social media reconnaissance. Eric's Facebook profile was a treasure trove of self-incrimination. Recent posts showed him at restaurants I recognized from our credit card statements, always with colleagues who remained carefully out of frame. But social media leaves digital fingerprints, and those fingerprints told a story. Location tags, timestamps, tagged friends, it all painted a picture of a man living beyond his means while conducting an affair with his employee. I started screenshotting everything, building a timeline that correlated with Lauren's late meetings. Next, I researched the partners at Morrison & Associates. The founding partner, James Morrison, was old-school Baltimore legal establishment. His bio emphasized integrity, family values, and professional ethics, the kind of man who wouldn't appreciate his firm being associated with workplace affairs and financial irresponsibility. I crafted a careful email from an anonymous account. Mr. Morrison, as a concerned member of the Baltimore legal community, I feel obligated to bring to your attention some concerning behavior by one of your partners. Eric Pomeroy has been conducting an inappropriate relationship with a paralegal employee using firm resources for personal entertainment and may be facing serious financial difficulties that could reflect poorly on your firm's reputation. I trust you will handle this matter with appropriate discretion. A friend of professional ethics. I didn't send it immediately. Timing was everything, and I wanted to coordinate my attacks for maximum impact. That evening, Lauren came home earlier than usual, looking stressed and angry. "We need to talk," she announced. "Sure. How was your day?" "Don't play games with me, Neil. Eric's been getting strange calls at work. Someone's been asking questions about him." I looked up from my laptop with genuine curiosity. "What kind of questions?" "About his finances, his relationships, his professional conduct. This has your fingerprints all over it." "I'm flattered you think I'm that resourceful, but I've been busy with my own concerns, like finding a good divorce attorney and figuring out how to split up 18 years of shared assets." Lauren sat down across from me, her expression shifting from anger to something that might have been fear. "Neil, we can still fix this. We can go to counseling, work through our problems. Divorce doesn't have to be the answer." "It's interesting that you're suddenly interested in working on our marriage now that there are financial consequences." "That's not fair." "Fair?" I laughed, and it came out harsher than I'd intended. "You've been sleeping with another man for months, spending our money on your affair, lying to my face every day, and you want to talk about fair?" "It wasn't supposed to happen. It just developed." "Affairs don't just develop, Lauren. They're a series of choices. You chose to flirt with him. You chose to meet him outside work. You chose to sleep with him. You chose to lie to me about it. Every step was a decision." She was crying again, but this time it seemed more genuine. Less performance, more actual regret. I felt so invisible in our marriage, like I was just the woman who did laundry and managed schedules and made sure everyone else's life ran smoothly. Eric made me feel special, important. "You were important. You were the most important person in my world for 18 years, but you decided that wasn't enough? Can you forgive me?" I looked at my wife. Really looked at her. She was still beautiful at 37, still the woman I'd fallen in love with in college, but something fundamental had broken between us, and I wasn't sure if forgiveness was even relevant anymore. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But it doesn't matter. Trust is like structural integrity. Once it's compromised, the whole building becomes unsafe." That night, after Lauren went to bed, I sent the email to James Morrison. Then I created a fake Facebook account and started friend requesting people from Morrison & Associates, including several of Eric's colleagues and some of Lauren's friends. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Eric's office building. I wanted to observe the fallout firsthand. I didn't have to wait long. Around 10:30, I saw Eric emerge from the parking garage, looking agitated and talking rapidly on his phone. He paced the sidewalk for several minutes, gesturing angrily at whoever was on the other end of the call. My phone rang. Lauren. "Eric's been called into a meeting with the senior partners," she said without preamble. "They're asking about his relationship with staff members." "That sounds uncomfortable. Neil, if you're behind this..." "I'm behind wanting a divorce from my cheating wife. Everything else is just consequences." I hung up and continued watching Eric pace. After about 20 minutes, he went back inside. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria. "Hearing interesting rumors from my contacts at Morrison & Associates. Your boy might be in some hot water." The rest of the day passed quietly, but I could feel the pressure building. Like watching a stress test on a bridge. Everything looks normal until suddenly it doesn't. That evening, Lauren came home looking defeated. "Eric's been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation?" "That's unfortunate." "They're reviewing all his cases, his expense reports, his client relationships. If they find anything inappropriate, he could lose his partnership. Sounds like he should have been more careful about mixing business with pleasure. Lauren stared at me with something approaching awe. You really are going to destroy him, aren't you? I'm not destroying anything. I'm just letting natural consequences play out. Actions have results, Lauren. It's basic physics. She sat down heavily, looking older than her 37 years. What happens now? Now you decide whether you want to make this divorce easy or hard. Easy means we split assets fairly, you get reasonable alimony, and we move on with our lives. Hard means we litigate everything, spend money on lawyers, and drag this out for months while your boyfriend's career implodes. And if I choose easy? Then we file no fault, agree on terms, and you can start over with a clean slate. She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. I never meant for it to go this far, she said finally. But it did, and now we all have to live with the consequences. That night, I lay in bed listening to Lauren cry quietly in the guest room where she'd been sleeping since our confrontation. I felt something I hadn't expected, a kind of peace. For the first time in months, everyone knew where they stood. The lies were over, the pretending was finished. Tomorrow, I would find out just how far Eric was willing to go to protect his crumbling life, and I would be ready for him. The next morning brought the kind of spring thunderstorm that makes Baltimore feel like a city under siege. I was drinking coffee and watching rain lash the kitchen windows when my doorbell rang at 7:30 a.m. Eric Pomeroy stood on my front porch, soaked and furious, looking like a man who'd spent the night making bad decisions. His usually perfect hair was plastered to his head, his expensive suit was wrinkled, and his eyes had the wild look of someone whose carefully constructed world was falling apart. "We need to talk," he said. I opened the door wider. "Come in. You're dripping on my porch." He stepped inside, trailing water and anger. "You son of a bitch. You think you're so clever." "I think I'm a man whose wife has been sleeping with her boss. Everything else is just details." Eric's face was red with rage and embarrassment. "You're trying to destroy my career over a personal matter." "Actually, you destroyed your career by sleeping with an employee and lying about it to your partners. I just helped speed up the discovery process." "Lauren loves me. Lauren loves the idea of you. There's a difference." I gestured toward the living room. "Sit down. You're making a puddle." Surprisingly, he did. Maybe the fight had gone out of him, or maybe he was finally realizing the scope of his problems. Either way, he slumped into my chair like a deflated balloon. "The firm is conducting a full investigation," he said. "They're going through my expense reports, my case files, my client communications. If they find any evidence that I used firm resources for personal matters, you'll lose your partnership. I'll lose everything, my career, my reputation, my income, the alimony payments to my ex-wife, the condo, the car. It's all leveraged against my partnership status." I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Should have thought about that before you started sleeping with my wife. Eric looked up at me with something approaching desperation. "What do you want?" "I want you to stay away from Lauren." "That's it?" "That's it. End the relationship, transfer her to a different department, or help her find a new job and disappear from our lives. Do that, and I'll stop providing information to your partners." "You can't prove I've done anything wrong." I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo Maria had taken, Eric and Lauren entering his condo building together on a Friday evening. "I can prove you've been conducting a relationship with an employee, using company time and resources to facilitate that relationship, and lying to your partners about it. In the current climate of workplace harassment awareness, how do you think that's going to play?" Eric stared at the photo, his face cycling through anger, fear, and resignation. "You're blackmailing me." "I'm offering you a chance to minimize the damage. There's a difference." We sat in silence for several minutes, listening to rain hammer the roof. Finally, Eric spoke. "Lauren won't just walk away. She thinks we have a future together." "Then you better be very convincing when you explain why you don't." Eric stood up, water still dripping from his clothes. "You know what the funny thing is? She doesn't even love you anymore. She told me your marriage has been dead for years." "Maybe it has. But that's between Lauren and me. You're just the symptom, not the disease." After he left, I called Maria and told her to document his visit. Then I called Patricia Kellerman and updated her on the situation. "Sounds like your leverage is working," she said. "But be careful. Desperate people do unpredictable things." That afternoon, Lauren came home early, looking shell-shocked. "Eric broke up with me," she announced. "I'm sorry to hear that." She stared at me. Are you? Are you really sorry?" I considered the question honestly. I'm sorry you're in pain. I'm not sorry the affair is over. He said he couldn't risk his career for me, that his partners were watching him too closely. Probably a smart decision on his part. Lauren collapsed onto the couch, looking smaller than I'd seen her in years. What happens to me now? You figure out what you want your life to look like and you build it, same as everyone else. I don't know how to be alone. You won't be alone forever, but you need to be alone long enough to figure out who you are when you're not trying to be what someone else wants. That evening, we sat down and worked out the basic terms of our divorce. It was surprisingly civil, maybe because the drama was finally over, or maybe because we were both exhausted from months of deception and conflict. Lauren would keep her job. Eric had arranged a transfer to a different department to avoid any appearance of impropriety. She'd get half the house value, reasonable alimony for 3 years, and her car. I'd keep my retirement accounts and the larger share of our savings, which seemed fair given the circumstances. The boys are going to be devastated, she said as we finished dividing up 18 years of shared life. They'll be okay. Kids are resilient, and they're old enough to understand that sometimes marriages don't work out. Will you tell them about the affair? I thought about Josh and Drew, both good kids who respected their mother and deserved to keep respecting her. That's between you and them, but if they ask me directly, I won't lie. 3 weeks later, our divorce was finalized. Lauren moved into a small apartment across town, and I began the strange process of learning to live alone again. Eric lasted another month at Morrison & Associates before resigning to pursue other opportunities. Word around the Baltimore legal community was that he'd been given a choice between resignation and termination. He took a job with a smaller firm at half his previous salary. His ex-wife took him back to court for increased alimony based on his reduced income, which created an interesting legal paradox. He couldn't afford to pay more because he was making less, but he was making less because of choices that demonstrated poor judgment. The last I heard, he'd moved back in with his parents in Glen Burnie. 6 months after our divorce was final, I ran into Lauren at the grocery store. She looked good, healthier, more relaxed, like she'd finally stopped trying to be someone she wasn't. "How are you doing?" she asked. "Good. You?" "Better. I'm taking classes. Thinking about going back to school, maybe becoming a teacher." "That sounds like you." We stood there for a moment. Two people who'd shared most of their adult lives and now were essentially strangers. "I'm sorry," she said finally, "for all of it. You deserved better." We both deserved better, but we're both going to be okay. She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in over a year. "Yeah, we are." As I watched her walk away, I felt something I hadn't expected. Gratitude. Not for the affair or the divorce or the pain we'd all caused each other, but for the clarity that came after, for the chance to build something real instead of maintaining something broken. That night, I sat on my back deck with a beer, watching the sun set over the yard where I'd once planned to grow old with someone who'd stopped wanting to grow old with me. The silence was different now, not empty, but peaceful. My phone buzzed with a text from Dave. "Poker game Friday, you in?" I typed back, "Absolutely." For the first time in months, I was looking forward to Friday night.